a wider audience here in Berlin. And our reading series follows a few very simple rules. First of all, there's the age limit, of course, and then there's the focus on one genre, namely prose. So we represent prose in this little festival among some of the other editions. Yes. So if you come to one of our readings, which I hope that the Berlin crowd of you will do in the near future, you will have a chance to hear 5 selected authors read from their manuscripts, and you will also gain insights into their work process, into maybe future projects, and hear much, much more. We have short interview rounds with each of the authors, so you can also learn a little bit more about them, their personality, and what is important to them in their work. Another nice rule that we have for ourselves is that all of our events are free. That is somewhat important to us because we have, obviously we work with people who are not very well known yet, so we don't have names that really would draw a crowd. But also we have a lot of younger audience, I think that should be clear. And they often don't have a lot of money. So the way it works, you can imagine, is that we take donations after the event, but that way no one has to feel some kind of pressure or has to really ask themselves, do I have these, whatever, 3 or 5 euros right now, or would I rather spend them on, say, a nicer dinner? We are quite a young reading series, also in the sense that we have existed now for a little more than 2 years. So I did the first reading in 2013, and when I saw that that kind of worked, I decided that I wanted to do an entire series, make it a regular thing, and Elisabeth is also in the back here joining us this afternoon, decided to also help me, and now we do everything together. So should you have any questions, it's always also possible to talk to Elisabeth, and she will gladly help you and answer your questions. So we both had previous experience in organizing literary events, and that worked out quite well. But I want to make this very clear because we're among the younger participants in this festival, in the whole crowd group. We realize that it's very important for us to be listening, and for me, in both yesterday and today, it has been incredibly exciting to hear about all of your projects and experiences, because obviously some of you guys have already gone a road or a way that is much, much longer than what we have done in the past 2 years. So that has been really, really helpful to me, and also will be helpful to us. So the people who come to our reading series expect to be entertained. They expect to encounter a diverse set of authors and texts. And all of you have had at some point to select texts for either a publishing project or an event, and you know that the secret when you have to work with a larger group of authors is you have to find that perfect mix. Like, you can have 5 great texts, but the combination of the 5 great texts might in the end not be so great. Maybe too similar, or maybe canceling each other out in some way. So we try to look for different styles, for different themes. The idea always being that if you come to one of our events, for everyone who comes, you should hear at least one story or one excerpt of a novel that you really, really like. There can also be one thing that you really, really don't like or really can't connect with, but it should be so diverse that you can find something that you can really connect to. Which also helps in the organization is that Elisabeth and I have somewhat different tastes, so we try to combine it, and that helps with finding this right mix. Can I have the next slide and then the next? So, long quotes, preventive long quotes. So obviously the first criteria when picking the authors for a series is the quality of the text. That should be clear. What happens then when I have a group of great texts that I found, and I still have to pick, obviously, from that great selection of texts, I still have to pick my 5 people that I want to invite. So those are some criteria that we keep in the back of our mind, and it's actually, I find it sometimes surprising that I still get announcements on Facebook and other places online where I see that someone had also issued a call for submissions, and surprised, they ended up with 5 or 6 male authors picked from their submissions. We've heard it from other people before, for example from Amanda, who also said that she received the equal number of submissions from women and men. That is a similar case for us. Like, we receive a lot of submissions from women also. So sometimes it still strikes me as odd. It also, of course, works the other way around when you have an event with, I'm talking about events really with a larger number of authors, where there are only men or only women on stage. It can be a little weird. So what we try to do is we try to avoid these one-gender readings and aim over the year to create a balance in our choice of authors. I'm sure most of you have by now, over my talking, read the quote. I'm just going to read it out loud once more. This is from Marion Poschmann, German author. The Germans will know her. She's quite famous. She was on the jury of the Open Mic last year. Open Mic is the most important literary competition for young authors under 35. And she was asked to write about her experience of being in the jury. So she says, of the 22 finalists, 13 are women, more than half of the group. The endless complaints about a literary industry dominated by men should therefore be seen as unfounded, right? I read the questionnaires that the candidates had received. When asked about tradition, role models, current reading material, the answers present, with horrifyingly little deviation, exactly the image that I had always taken to be a cliché. Women read everything. Men, on the other hand, read only books by men. Thus, no matter who wins this competition, the prerogative of interpretation stays where it has always been. Books by women might get bought, but only books written by men are deemed relevant. So, of course, very specific to her experience in that moment. But I think it's important for those of us who work with younger authors. It often seems that there are so many women, female authors really pushing to the front and also being successful, being recognized. I think it's important to hear someone as successful as her still call the industry out on what might happen to female authors later. Do you have the next slide, please? If you are not from Germany, you might not have had to deal with a long debate on whether or not studying creative writing would turn aspiring writers into great novelists or horribly boring machines. For us, this question is important in another sense. Like, we don't think that studying creative writing ruins your style, but for us it becomes again a matter of balance. It would be very, very easy for us to only invite young authors from these creative writing programs. Germany has 2 very famous ones, Leipzig and Hildesheim, but these universities have their own reading series, and quite frankly, that will make us pretty lazy organizers if we essentially reproduced the decisions of the people at the universities. But also, of course, one should not ignore Leipzig and Hildesheim. More and more young authors choose this road, and it is important to us to also give them a chance to display their works in Berlin. My colleague Elisabeth has herself completed the Bachelor's in Creative Writing in Hildesheim. I have received a BA in more traditional subjects, so together we hope we can understand the young author's paths much better than each of us could alone. And the next slide. Pictures from our last reading here at Lettrétage a few months ago. Another important factor for us is the mixing of young authors that have already started to make a name for themselves. This is now very specific. If you are not super focused on writers under 30, they will not have made a name for themselves in the sense that they appear in The Guardian or in New York Times Literary Supplement. And those writers who are really completely new to the game. At our last reading, for example, we were lucky to present both Paula Fürstenberg and also Verena Kessler. See them both reading. Paula read from her novel, and Verena from short story. Paula Fürstenberg is what, for us, is sort of top of the game when you work with authors under 30, which means that she has won a huge number of awards, many publications and anthologies. and she has sort of literary agents swarming around her, waiting for her to finish her novel. Verena has had a completely different route. She had been on stage before, but never at a reading like this, but she comes from Poetry Slam, and she's no awards, no competitions, nothing. So our reading event was really the first kind of literary event like this that she did. And I'm happy to say that both Paula and Verena, I think, were happy with how the night went and how the reading went.